A knock at the door. My name is Owen, and at 49, I've spent almost half my life married to Carol. She just turned 51 and embodies everything you'd expect of a university professor. Sharp, driven, and deeply passionate about her work. When we met, I was the one with big dreams but empty pockets, hustling day and night to build something out of nothing. Carol stood by me like a lighthouse in a storm, steady and unwavering, as I transformed my modest bakery into a thriving chain. At the same time, she was climbing her own mountain, carving her path in academia. When I finally found success, I poured my heart into supporting Carol, financially, emotionally, so she could reach her full potential. Over the years, our dreams became our reality. We raised 2 children, weathered life's storms, and built a life that seemed unshakable in our charming colonial home in a quiet New Jersey suburb. Yet lately something has shifted. Our marriage, once warm and steadfast, now feels like a frayed thread struggling to hold. Drifting apart. Carol and I have always been busy people. I rise before dawn to manage the bakeries, while she rushes off to teach. But over the past few months, we've become like 2 trains on separate tracks, moving in different directions. By the time I come home, exhausted and smelling of flour, Carol is often locked away in her home office or returning late, claiming she was at informal faculty meetings. I didn't want to overthink it, but there were signs, subtle, yet undeniable. The bright, fitted blouses she started wearing, the ones that clung to her figure in ways I hadn't seen in years. When I teased her about dressing up, she dismissed it with a laugh. Got to keep up with the younger crowd, she'd say, brushing past me with a breezy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the little things, her new wardrobe, her nervous laughter, and the way she seemed to already have answers prepared whenever I asked about her late nights. I ignored it, convincing myself that people change, and maybe Carol was simply reinventing herself. But deep down, something gnawed at me, whispering that things were not as they seemed. The calm before the storm. That morning was one of my rare days off. The bakeries ran smoothly without me for once, and the house was unusually quiet. Our daughter, Sarah, was halfway across the world in Japan, chasing her dream of becoming a Japanese language specialist. William, our 25-year-old nephew, whom we raised as our own after my sister's tragic passing, was busy building his life in another city. Carol had left for the university just minutes earlier, leaving me alone with a steaming cup of coffee and the peaceful sunlight streaming through the windows. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to believe everything was fine. But looking back now, I see it was one of those deceptive calms that come before a storm. The knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. Visitors were rare in our quiet neighborhood, especially on a weekday morning. An unfamiliar visitor. I opened the door to find a woman I didn't recognize. She appeared to be in her early 40s, dressed simply in jeans and a blouse, but her face told a different story. Pale, nervous, and exhausted, as though she hadn't slept in days. My eyes fell to her trembling hands, which clutched a small canister of pepper spray. Alarm bells went off in my head. Sensing my unease, she quickly shoved the spray into her purse, her movements jerky and awkward. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice trembling. I think I have the wrong address. Her words didn't sit right with me. Something about her demeanor screamed desperation. My instincts told me to close the door, but my curiosity overpowered my caution. Who are you looking for? I asked, my voice steady but cautious. She hesitated, shifting on her feet. Carol, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I must be mistaken. The mention of my wife's name sent a chill down my spine. Carol, I repeated, my tone sharper than I intended. My wife. She left for work about 15 minutes ago. What's this about? The moment I said those words, the woman crumbled. Her shoulders sagged, her face crumpling as tears began to stream down her cheeks. What started as quiet sobs quickly turned into jagged gasps, her entire body shaking as she stood there on my doorstep, unraveling, inviting the storm inside. I couldn't just leave her there. Whatever was happening, this woman clearly needed help. Come inside, I said gently, stepping aside to let her in. She hesitated, searching my face for reassurance, then nodded and stepped into the house. I led her to the kitchen, pulling out a chair. Sit down, I said softly, I'll make you some coffee. As I moved around the kitchen, I kept an eye on her. She sat hunched over, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, her breathing uneven. Once the coffee was ready, I placed it in front of her and sat across the table. Take your time, I urged, watching as she wrapped her trembling hands around the mug. Finally she spoke. My name is Elizabeth, she said, her voice soft and shaky. Elizabeth, I repeated, leaning forward. Okay. Why were you looking for Carol? What's going on? Her lips quivered as she tried to find the right words. She massaged her temple, as though trying to force her thoughts into coherence. I don't know if I should have come here, she admitted. I wanted to talk to her. But now, her hesitation only deepened my unease. Whatever she was about to say, I knew it would change everything. As Elizabeth sipped her coffee, her fingers tightened around the mug like it was her lifeline. Her eyes darted nervously, filled with a mix of fear and guilt. Finally she whispered, I'm sorry. I've been so nervous, I probably seem unhinged to you. I shook my head, masking the storm brewing inside me with a calm demeanor. You don't seem crazy, Elizabeth. You seem like someone who's dealing with something overwhelming. Take your time. I'm here to listen. Her gaze lingered on the table, as though searching for the courage to speak. When she finally did, her voice was so faint I had to lean forward to catch it. It's about your wife, she said. My chest tightened, a heavy dread settling over me. What about my wife? I asked, my voice low, controlled, though my heart pounded violently against my ribs. Elizabeth took a shaky breath, her hands trembling around the mug. I wanted to hurt her, she confessed, her voice breaking. I thought about confronting her, maybe even using the pepper spray. But I realized I couldn't do it. Something stopped me, God, maybe. Her words hit like a thunderclap. I froze, struggling to grasp the enormity of her admission. Why? I managed, my voice barely audible. What happened between you and Carol? Elizabeth's face crumpled, her shame and despair spilling out like a dam broken. I don't even know where to start, she murmured. You seem like a good man, and I hate that I'm the one to tell you this. But you deserve to know. I leaned in, every nerve in my body on edge. Just tell me, I urged. Whatever it is, I need the truth. Elizabeth nodded, tears streaming freely now. Your wife. Carol is dating my husband, she said, her voice trembling. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I felt the air leave my lungs, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse under the weight of what she'd just revealed. I'm sorry, I whispered, unsure if I was apologizing to her or myself. Can you say that again? Elizabeth nodded, her voice steadier now, but her anguish unmistakable. Your wife and my husband, Thomas, have been seeing each other. I have proof. The room seemed to tilt, my world cracking open. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Proof? I croaked. How do you know this? Her words tumbled out in a rush, the dam of restraint completely shattered. Thomas teaches at another college. I've suspected him for months, late nights, strange expenses, but I couldn't prove anything. So I installed a hidden camera in our home. Her voice wavered, and she swallowed hard before continuing. I hated doing it, but I was desperate to know the truth. And that's when I saw her, your wife. Thomas brought her to our house while I was away. I felt my stomach churn, the betrayal cutting deeper with every word. What did you see? I asked, my voice tight, barely masking the turmoil inside. Elizabeth hesitated, her hands shaking as she reached into her purse. I recorded it. I didn't know if I should show you. But now. She trailed off, pulling out her phone and sliding it toward me. It's right here. You deserve to see it. I stared at the device, my heart pounding in my ears. Slowly, I picked it up and pressed play. The video started with a view of a cozy living room. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, walked into the frame, glancing behind him. Then she appeared. Carol. My wife. The woman I'd built my life with. There was no mistaking her. The way she smiled, the way she carried herself. I felt the ground shift beneath me as I watched Thomas lean in and kiss her. Not a polite kiss or an innocent peck, but a kiss filled with intimacy. They laughed, talked, oblivious to the camera capturing their betrayal. I couldn't watch any more. With trembling hands, I slid the phone back to Elizabeth. My world, the one I thought was unshakable, was unraveling. Elizabeth's voice broke through my thoughts. I'm so sorry, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. I didn't want to hurt you, but you deserve to know. I stared at her, the rawness of her pain mirroring my own. Finally, I found my voice. What do you plan to do? I asked, my words slow, deliberate. She hesitated, wiping her eyes. I want people to know the truth, she said. I want to expose Thomas for who he really is. But I'm stuck. He's cut me off financially, and I can't afford a lawyer. Her vulnerability struck a chord in me. I sat back, the weight of her words sinking in. Then an idea began to form, a plan. Elizabeth, I said carefully, what if I helped you? Her eyes widened in surprise. Help me? How? You've already given me the proof I need to end my marriage, I said. And I have the resources to act. I'll hire a lawyer. Not just for me but for you too. We'll handle both divorces together. Elizabeth stared at me, her disbelief evident. You do that? But why? Because we're in this together now, I said firmly. Your husband betrayed you. My wife betrayed me. This isn't about revenge. It's about justice and protecting ourselves. Her expression softened, hope flickering in her eyes. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. If you're serious, I'll give you the original recording. And I promise, I won't do anything rash. Good, I said, my tone resolute. We'll do this the right way, calm, quiet, and calculated. No dramatic confrontations. We'll let the truth speak for itself. We exchanged contact information. And before she left, I reassured her. You're not alone in this anymore. We'll figure it out together. Once she was gone, the house fell into an unbearable silence. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in my hand. Every fiber of my being wanted to confront Carol, to demand answers, to shout and rage. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, the very next day, I met with a lawyer. This storm would not destroy me. I would weather it, and I would come out stronger on the other side. I explained everything to Mark, my lawyer. A sharp, confident man with an air of quiet authority. From Carol's affair to Elizabeth's predicament, I laid it all out in meticulous detail. Mark listened intently, his pen gliding across a notepad as he absorbed the intricacies of the situation. The case for divorce is strong, he assured me, his voice steady and reassuring. As for Elizabeth, I can represent her as well. It'll be complex handling two simultaneous cases, but it's doable. I nodded, already resolved. I'll pay for her legal fees up front. She's been through enough, and I want her to have a fair fight. Mark agreed without hesitation. And just like that, the wheels of justice were set in motion. Within days, divorce papers were drafted for both me and Elizabeth. Each document was a step toward reclaiming control over our lives. A ray of hope. A week later, I met Elizabeth at a quiet cafe to update her. Her gratitude was palpable, but the strain of her situation lingered in her eyes. As we talked, she mentioned her financial struggles again. An offhand comment, but it struck a chord with me. Elizabeth, I said, leaning forward, I have an opening at one of my bakeries. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work, and it'll help you save money to pay me back for the lawyer, if you want. What do you think? Her eyes lit up, a spark of hope igniting in the depths of her weariness. Really? You'd do that for me? Thank you, Owen. I'd love that. It's the least I can do, I said, smiling warmly. That evening, as I drove home, I felt the faintest flicker of relief. For the first time in weeks, the chaos felt manageable, like a storm beginning to pass. Facing the truth, when the divorce papers were finalized, I knew exactly how I wanted to handle it. I didn't want Carol to hear from someone else, nor did I want a public spectacle. This was a conversation that needed to happen face to face. It was a Thursday evening when she came home late, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she entered the house. She dropped her bag on the counter with a sigh, her exhaustion evident. Normally, I might have asked why she was late, but not tonight. I sat at the dining table, the divorce papers neatly stacked in front of me. Carol, I said, my voice calm but firm. She turned to me, her expression shifting to one of confusion. What's wrong? She asked, frowning. I held up the papers, letting the gravity of the moment settle in the air between us. These are for you, I said evenly. Divorce papers. I know about your affair with Thomas. Her face went pale, the blood draining from her cheeks. For a moment, genuine shock flashed in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I replied, my tone steady. "I've seen the video." The denial came first. "This is ridiculous. I don't know what you've seen, but it's not what you think." Then came the deflection. "And even if something did happen, which I'm not admitting, it's your fault. You've been so distant, so preoccupied with your work. What did you expect?" I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Go on, Carol. Blame me. Explain how your betrayal was my doing." She clenched her fists, her voice rising in desperation. "It wasn't like that. It was just a stupid fling. It didn't mean anything. I was bored, Owen. Everything between us felt so predictable, so lifeless. I just wanted to feel alive again." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow and sharp. "So your solution was to cheat on me? To sleep with another man? That's your idea of fixing things." She flinched, her resolve cracking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I thought it would make you notice me again." Her words only deepened the ache in my chest. "Carol," I said sharply, my voice like steel, "don't insult me. I saw enough of the video to know exactly what happened. You weren't trying to save our marriage. You were destroying it." Her tears flowed freely now, her voice breaking as she tried to plead. "Please, Owen. Don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built. It was a mistake, one stupid mistake." I stood, grabbing my jacket. "The papers are on the table. You can sign them, or the lawyers will handle it. Either way, we're done." Without another word, I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage of her choices. The trials and the truth. The weeks leading up to the divorce trial were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and emotional exhaustion. Mark navigated both my case and Elizabeth's with precision, ensuring we entered the courtroom armed with undeniable evidence. Carol and I divided our assets without much contention, though I insisted on keeping the house. It was non-negotiable, a place I had poured my heart and soul into. Mark negotiated a deal, and Carol, drained and defeated, didn't put up much of a fight. Elizabeth's trial unfolded similarly. Thomas, arrogant and dismissive, tried to contest her claims, but the evidence was overwhelming. The video, financial records, and witness testimonies painted a damning picture. In the end, Elizabeth walked away with her rightful share of their assets. And then, the final bombshell dropped. Thomas had another mistress. The man who had pursued Carol so passionately discarded her just as easily, leaving her to grapple with the consequences of her betrayal. Moving forward, Elizabeth, on the other hand, began to rebuild her life. She poured herself into her new role at the bakery, her resilience shining through. Over time, I promoted her, and she flourished. Watching her transformation was a reminder of the strength people find in adversity. As for me, recovery has been slow. The betrayal left scars, but it also taught me invaluable lessons. Trust is vital in any relationship, but it must be earned and maintained. Denial only prolongs pain, and sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that set us free. Life isn't perfect, but it's moving forward, one day at a time. And for that I'm grateful.